All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, this is probably going to be our last in-person podcast, sadly.
For a while, yes.
Yeah.
Jake, you're heading back to Australia tomorrow.
Yep.
After almost 2 years being here. Our first podcast was in August 2023, almost 2 years ago. So we've been doing one virtually every week since then, haven't we? And we intend to carry on because we'll be doing it, albeit not sat at the same table, but doing it from a distance in future, unless and until I come out to the Sunshine Coast in Australia, which I'm very tempted to do, mate.
Well, I've been trying to twist your arm for the last few years, mate, trying to get you to come over.
Absolutely,
There's been whispers of you potentially coming over for a test match at the MCG.
Well, you never know.
Test match, maybe.
You never know, or for a State of Origin game in Brisbane, maybe. Who knows?
Absolutely, mate.
That'd be great.
As long as you're wearing maroon.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Don't worry. I'm a Queensland fan.
Good man. But yeah, mate. So we'll continue the podcast. Obviously, try and go for the same upload time every week. It'll be a virtual version.
Yes.
All things going well, but. Yeah, mate, I'm sad to be leaving, but unfortunately, if I was to stay any longer, I'm sure the immigration police would probably come and kick me out.
They probably would, yeah. Undesirable visitor, of course. But, yeah. But it's a shame that you're going just when the weather's getting great, Jake.
I know. Where's
it's
this come from?
Australian-type weather at the moment.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here sweating away in a confined space, and we should be outside, shouldn't we?
Yeah. Well, I was comparing the weather on the app the other day, and I thought, you know what, it's starting to get hotter over here than it is in the Sunshine Coast where I'm moving to. So
absolutely,
that adjustment might not be so bad after all. But
and you're going to be working for the ABC, is it, when you get back there?
Yeah. Going back and working with the ABC on the Sunshine Coast, which I spent a bit of time in that office.
Sounds terrible, mate. It really does.
No, mate. So I'll be on the Sunshine Coast campaigning for them to bring an NRL team to the Sunshine Coast.
Yes,
so they play a few matches there every year. So, if I can get on the bandwagon and hopefully convince Volandis to set up shop there.
Well, you could be the new chief executive, mate, couldn't you?
Perhaps, mate, perhaps.
Yeah.
But without further ado, mate, how about we get into the weekend's matchups, because we've got a lot of news to talk about this week. But we'll start with Thursday night. We had Warrington 32 defeating St Helens 18, and I thought, what a gritty performance from Warrington in that match.
Without George Williams and Mark Sneed, of course.
Yep.
So, it was, and I didn't think they'd beat St Helens without George Williams, I've got to say. So it was. They're a funny club, though, Warrington, aren't they? They're up and down all the time, it seems to me. You almost find that they give a great performance and then give a much less great performance. It must be a bit frustrating for Sam Burgess, but certainly after beating St Helens last week, it was a time for them to celebrate, and some great tries, some great performances in their side, and on the other hand, for St Helens, it was Matty Ashton scoring a hat trick, for example, but St Helens, gosh. Didn't look great, did they? They and defensively didn't look all that great, I thought. And they were convincingly beaten. I wonder whether Paul Wellens is under pressure to keep his job, because I do think that a lot of St Helens fans are probably a bit disappointed at the way things are going this year. I know they were full of optimism. They lost at Wigan and they lost at Warrington, and it's not disgraceful to lose at either club, but it's not that many years ago that St Helens would have been winning games like that. Yeah,
that's right. And I think when I was watching, obviously they lost Mark Sneed just before half-time.
Yeah.
And over that half-time break, I thought to myself, I don't know if Warrington are going to be able to hang on here. I think St Helens will come out
Absolutely.
and just work their way at it and will outgrind Warrington. But it just didn't seem to be the case.
No.
Warrington seemed to find another gear late in the second half, and they were dropping like flies, the Warrington players, but they kept defending hard.
Showed great spirit. I can only imagine they'd been given quite a roasting by Sam Burgess for some of their earlier performances, and it worked. But I'm still not sure how they're going to cope without George Williams, really, over the next few weeks. And now, as we say, without Mark Sneed as well. that's quite a challenge for them, isn't it?
And I assume Matty Ashton will have to sit out this week after failing his HIA.
Yes, of course.
So they might be struggling to put together a competitive side for Magic Weekend.
They might be, and they're playing Wigan, of course. That's the other. They're having some tough tests, and the Magic Weekend, it couldn't be tougher, could it?
Yeah, that's right. Now, looking at the way St Helens performed, mate, do you think Johnny Lomax would have made any difference to that result?
Well, it's difficult to say, but I mean, what's going to be interesting is to see whether Johnny Lomax is back for the Magic Weekend, and I think he might be. I'd be quite amazed, actually, if he wasn't. Obviously, I mean, I don't think George Whitby had a bad game, and certainly, kicked pretty well. But sometimes you give a teenager 2 or 3 games, and you probably don't want to overexpose them, do you? So I think potentially he might bring Lomax back, but who knows? We've not seen the team list yet for this weekend's Magic Weekend game, so that remains to be seen.
Yeah, that's right. Moving into Friday's matchup, mate, we had another pretty competitive match between Hull KR. They defeated Hull KR and Leeds. They defeated Leeds 20 points to 14
after being 14-6 down, and with Suaso Su sent off, but since then not being suspended or not having any points on his disciplinary record. In other words, no charges being brought against him. Now, that's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because I thought that his dismissal was a very harsh dismissal by Chris Kendall. And, of course, Kendall also showed a red card to Ash Handley later in the game. But, so... the business about contact with the head, it's a really difficult situation for referees to interpret. And it looks as though Chris Kendall might have, perhaps overextended, just gone over the top a little bit. But I've got so much sympathy for him, because you've got to make a decision on the spot like that when you're a referee. You've got virtually no time or very little time to reflect on what the situation is, and I'm just wondering whether, I mean, I've suggested, if you've read my column this week, that in all cases where there's a contact with the head, every card should be a yellow card without exception, but that the video referee should then have maybe 10 minutes or so to re-examine the evidence from all angles and to decide whether the infringement, the foul play, contact with the head, merits a red card rather than a yellow one. And then perhaps that should be communicated to the crowd. So the player is sent off for 10 minutes, but before that 10 minutes expires, you then decide whether it's going to be for the full game or not. And, that would at least then hopefully arrive at a situation where there wouldn't be, the sort of situation like we got for Hull KR, which could actually have affected the outcome of the game, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
The fact that Hull KR fought back and won 2014, all credit to them. What a great performance it was by them. But, it was a situation they shouldn't have had to face, really. Yeah.
It's one of those ones where the officials shouldn't have to be rushed, like you said, to make a decision. I think that's a great way of doing it, because the video referee then has 10 minutes to thoroughly look at it.
Absolutely,
assuming,
yes.
No tries are scored in that time. They have to review.
yes.
But also you could have another official in there helping them make that decision, or they can have like a little vote.
Of course.
And we're seeing it in the NRL as well. There seems to be a crackdown on all of the high contact. So there's going to be no solution that pleases everyone.
No.
But unfortunately, these are the things we have to do to protect.
We need to
protect the players.
We're all in favour of protecting players. That's really vital. There's no argument about that from me. And if players are infringing and making contact with the head, even when it's accidental, which it nearly always is, to be honest, these days, I don't think there's any... I can't recall this season seeing contact with the head that was malicious. I don't know whether you can, but
No.
and if that were the case, the suspension would be very significant. The points and so on and so forth. But we want to get rid of head contact, whether it's even when it's accidental. Clearly,
And the other thing that annoys me too is when they're reviewing it and they're showing it in slow motion. It always looks 10
always
times
makes
worse.
It looks worse. It does.
So
Yes.
play it in full speed, and you hardly see the contact. But
Absolutely.
yeah, it's going to have fans debating for many months to come. I would say. I thought the Jack Sinfield one was almost the worst out of the three, and he got a yellow card, not a red.
And I think he did get points for that, didn't he?
So
disciplinary points.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, a bit of a head scratcher, and every referee's interpretation is going to be different.
That's true.
I think.
Yes. Yes. Well, we've now had 3 red cards, haven't we? We had the first one a week earlier, and now we've had 3. So it's unfortunate, but not entirely unexpected, really.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, mate. We'll move into Saturday's matchups. We had Castleford defeating Huddersfield 30 points to 12.
Well, Castleford really had to start playing well fairly soon, hadn't they? They've had some additions to their ranks and stiffened up the middle of the field, I think, from their point of view, and it was an incredibly welcome win for Danny Maguire. Very bad news though for Huddersfield, who still lie at the bottom of the table, 0 points from nine games. That's really disastrous for Luke Robinson, unfortunately. And I thought this game might be a bit closer than it was, particularly when Dane Gagai ran the length of the field to score Huddersfield's first try, which was pretty spectacular, wasn't it? But they couldn't repeat it, or that sort of play. I mean, they did get a second try later in the game to Ollie Wilson, but Castleford were well in charge, and Danny Maguire will now be hoping that they're only 4 points behind Wakefield, who are in 9th position. They play them this weekend, of course, in the Magic weekend at Newcastle. So that's an interesting game, and I think Castleford have had 2 or 3 good performances this year. The Hull KR game at the start of the season now, and they played well at Wakefield. They played well, obviously, against Huddersfield. So, this might be. We've been saying it's a 9-team competition, excluding Castleford, Salford, and Huddersfield. But Danny Maguire might want to argue with that, I think.
I'm just wondering where Huddersfield's first win's going to come from. Probably against Salford if they
I
play
should
them
think
in the
so.
coming
Yes.
weeks. But
yeah.
Yeah, it's I feel bad for Robinson as well. It's been a tough go for him this season. Not ideally. I guess you look at how Sam Burgess came into the competition. That's probably the ideal way as a first time sort of head coach to come in. But a bit unfortunate for Robinson. Moving on to the next matchup on Saturday, we had Leeds defeating Salford 28 points to 6.
Well, the least surprising result of the weekend, really, Jake. A comfortable win for Salford. Probably, I've got to say, I didn't see that game because it was on at the same time as the Catalans game against Wakefield, and I actually watched the Catalans game. But and it's a bit frustrating when games are on at the same time as each other, and they're on Sky Sports Plus, and you can't record either of them, but you can only watch one of them if you've only got one TV, of course, as I have. So it's a bit frustrating, but.
I don't blame you for watching the other game, mate, because when you know what the result's going to be of one, you're more inclined to watch the one that's going to be more competitive.
You are, and it was 18-0 at half-time at Salford. I think, Adrian Lamb sort of was a bit ho-hum about this game afterwards. He didn't... I don't think he claimed it was one of Lee's better performances, but it was just good enough to win the game against Salford, and Salford inevitably were well under the sort of strength that they would have had at the start of the season, and it's such a shame. But the good thing is that the Salford players went into this game having been paid their full whack of wages last Thursday. And I thought the crowd was quite a good crowd as well, wasn't it? 5,493. I mean, there will have been a lot of Lee fans there, but it just sort of shows, local derby does draw a crowd in.
Well, that's it. And
the Salford fans are really great, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And just the support we saw when they went down to Perpignan a couple of weeks back, it's great to see the fans still showing up week in and week out. And,
absolutely.
If you want to support a team at the highs, you've got to be there for the lows, I reckon.
Absolutely, yes.
Credit to them. The final matchup on Saturday, we had Catalans 24 defeating Wakefield 20.
Well,
Golden Point.
Yeah, what an end to the game, gosh. And what a tight game the whole way through. I mean, Wakefield could so easily have won that game, couldn't they? And it was, well, as you say, it came down to Golden Point. Remus Smith getting over to score a rare Golden Point try. It's very rare that Golden Point games end with a winning try. But this one did, and I think the Catalan Dragons will be mighty relieved, actually, to have won that game, which has actually put them above Wakefield in the league table. They're now in 7th place, just on 10 points, just outside the top 6 on points difference. But the Catalans, to me, are still not a convincing side, really. There's something, I think, missing in the Catalans. They ought to be capable of playing probably better than they are. And I still think Luke Keary had a good game, but we need to see a lot of succession of strong games from Luke, don't we? Hopefully, and hopefully that will come. He's a really good player, and it does take a lot of time for a new player playing in his position to settle into a team where he's going to have a big influence on the way the team plays, and hopefully they'll consolidate as the season continues to unfold. But Wakefield very unlucky, and can feel really quite pleased with the way they continue to play, and they could be higher in the table than they are now.
That's it. And you look at Catalan's team sheet, like you look at the names that are on that list and you think to yourself, man, this is a really good team they've got, but they just don't seem to be, as you said, reaching their potential yet.
Not yet.
I mean, saying that, they've been slowly chipping away. They've had a few wins now in the last few weeks.
They started slowly, didn't they? Yeah, as they often do, actually. They tend to come into a table a bit undercooked, into the league a bit undercooked sometimes. But they're gradually improving, and as they always say, it's not how you begin the season that really counts, it's how you end it. So, hopefully we'll see.
Moving on to the final matchup of the weekend on Sunday, we had Wigan defeating Hull FC 36 points to 12.
Well, Hull were under strength, and Wigan were always going to win this game. And what frustrates me, Jake, in a way, this was the 9th game of the season, and Hull played Wigan at home in the 2nd game of the season as well. Why are we playing a loop fixture so early in the season, a repeat fixture that's already taken place? I mean, from Hull's point of view, I think the score was in week 2, Wigan beat them 46-4 at the MKM Stadium. Last weekend it was 36-12, so there is, the margin was 42 points in February. The margin was 24 points in April. So that shows improvement from Hull's point of view. Yeah. But Wigan were always comfortably in charge of that game, it seemed to me. And, they ran away with it. Junior Nsemba scored an absolutely great try. Contender for try of the week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
If you recall it, my goodness,
he's great footwork for his size, doesn't he? And just his power as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Wigan have tied him up for a good number of years, haven't they? Forget precisely when his contract expires. Yeah. But I think I'd try him. I think if I were them, I'd time up to about the year 2100. I mean, they want to keep him no matter what, don't they?
Lifetime deal, yeah. I remember last year we were talking about, when he first sort of came onto the scene. He was starting to become a regular last season.
Yeah.
You looked at his body and you just thought he can still fill out a little bit more. It looked like he still had a bit of size to put on. And you look at him this year and you think, yeah, he's really starting to like fill out into that body, and he looks so comfortable out there. And he's only going to get better. So
he does. One of the negative things about this game, though, was the try that Wigan got through Abbas Miski, and that was on 45 minutes. Now, the thing was, he touched down in the corner, and the video referee took about 5 minutes reviewing the try to determine whether he'd put a foot in touch or not, and it was not very clear. And then so he kept going over it from different angles, then repeating the same angles, and it just got absolutely ridiculous. And there ought to be a shot clock of some sort on video refereeing decisions. No video refereeing decision should last more than a minute, or should take more than a minute to be made, in my view. And if it's not obvious from the footage that you've got, then you have to go with the referee's call.
Yeah.
And put a time limit on it, and make it, as I say, a minute. I would say, certainly not 5 minutes. And I mean, you can't blame the video referee for wanting to get the decision right, but when it takes so long, it's just absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. So that's something that the RFL ought to think very carefully about, I think.
And when you are at the stadium, it really sucks the energy out of
It
the
does.
stadium too, especially if it's a tight contest.
Kill it, yeah.
It can really change the momentum of the game.
And we had a photograph sent to us, actually, by the brilliant photographer Bernard Platt, who is the I think he is the Wigan photographer, showing that try and showing that it, the ball was grounded, and it did seem to be a genuine try according to the photograph. I mean, the photographs you can never, photographs are a snapshot of one moment in time, so you can never be absolutely certain that a photograph tells the whole story. But a brilliant shot by Bernard Platt, who's a great photographer, and many thanks to him for sending us that shot. So, I think it was a try. I don't think there's any much doubt about it, but that's just my position. But Wigan didn't actually need that try to win the game, did they?
No. They're very solid. And when they have performances like that, they just sort of remind everyone that, hey, we're still the team to beat.
Oh, they still are, yeah.
Yeah. But, mate, a very entertaining round of fixtures. We've obviously got Magic Weekend this weekend, but we'll get into those matchups a little bit later.
Yeah.
Any championship games or League One games that you think we should take a look at or touch on?
Well, the interesting Halifax remain at the top of the championship with a convincing 40 points to 12 win over London Broncos, who now fall to the next to last place in the table. Bradford Bulls went to Oldham, and everybody was anticipating a really tight game there, but Bradford whacked them 42-12. That was unexpected. Sheffield Eagles got 50 points against Batley Bulldogs, which again was quite surprising because Sheffield have been struggling a bit this year, and York Knights are climbing the table. They had a poor start to the season, but they're now in the top 6 places because they beat Widnes Vikings 26-12. But the team of the season, apart from Halifax, is Barrow, who are in second place, and they had a very good win against Doncaster, 24 points to 19, to just remain 2 points behind Halifax. So a really great, they've had a really great start to the season, Barrow, after a couple of seasons where they've struggled to stay in the championship. So, that's really fabulous. And in the League One, the only unbeaten team in the whole of our competitions are North Wales Crusaders, who had a very convincing 42-12 win over Whitehaven. and they're at the top of the League One table, 10 points from 5 games, with Midlands Hurricanes just behind them.
Wow.
2 outpost clubs at the top of the League One table. What do you think about that?
It's great to see. And, good. Obviously, great to see rugby league thriving in areas that aren't typically the heartland.
Yeah, and Gould Vikings won their second successive game, winning at Newcastle. So, absolutely terrific stuff.
I'd love to see that. All right, mate, let's touch on some of the news that's doing the rounds.
I'll tell you what, before we do, Jake, let's just talk a bit about the NRL competition, because I took out a subscription last weekend to be able to watch the NRL and stream NRL games, which I did because I was a bit cheesed off that Sky decided. Sky are broadcasting 3 NRL games per weekend, but last weekend they didn't broadcast any of the 3 games that were due to be played on Anzac Day, which is a big day for Australians, isn't it? As you obviously know. And I thought the 3 games for Anzac Day were, looked really great games, and they were indeed. You had the Roosters against St George, which was a fabulous game. You had the Warriors playing Newcastle, and then it all ended with Melbourne playing South Sydney, and all 3 games were sellouts. As you might expect on Anzac Day, and there were great, fabulous games to watch, and there's some great entertainment in the NRL at the moment.
Yeah, I wonder what the reasoning was for that decision. Was it a scheduling thing?
No idea.
Think, or like a scheduling clash? Or
no idea. Absolutely
maybe they just didn't
realise
realise that it was Anzac Day weekend. Perhaps.
Well, I can't imagine they wouldn't realise it. But,
who knows?
You never know. But no, I mean, I was a bit annoyed, but Watch NRL is watchnrl.com is where you go to download games, and it's a great service. I've not subscribed to that before because I've been too busy, and to be able to see 3 games a week plus the highlights has been as much time as I could devote to the NRL. But when you see everything that you can view via Watch NRL, it's really worth looking at, and the NRL ought to advertise that more widely in this country. They ought to advertise it with us, for example, because I'm quite sure a lot of our readers, if they knew what was on offer, if they're not already subscribing, they probably would do so. And I think the NRL's missing a trick there, personally.
Yeah, right. Because you're saying you get all the pre-match and post-match.
Oh yeah, you do. You get everything.
Like that too,
all the shows on Foxtel. Yeah, which you could spend an awful long time watching rugby league. And as I say, I don't have that amount of time, unfortunately. But
yeah. And just to clarify, that's not an advertisement. That's just a glowing review from Martyn. So
it is.
If they would like to sponsor the podcast, they're more than welcome to.
Well, why not? Yeah, they ought to. Yeah, but that's up to them, of course. And we won't wait too long, will we? But
that's it.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, mate. I'll have to give it a try. But I think with me moving back to Australia,
you won't be able to, because you can only get Watch NRL outside Australia, can't you?
Okay. Yeah. Wow. All right, mate. We'll stick to.
And just one thing, sorry, still on the NRL this weekend. Yeah. One of the games that was on Sky Sports was the West Tigers versus Cronulla Sharks game, and that was the game in which Lachlan Galvin came back into the West Tigers side and actually played a blinder. In my view, a lot of people wondered whether he would get a negative reception from the West Tigers fans. Probably only about half a dozen of them, booed him when they came on. But within 8 minutes, they were cheering him because he created the first try with a brilliant piece of play. And from then onwards, just had a great game. And it looks as though he and all the West Tigers players are great mates again. And it was a golden point game again. It was 18-all after 80 minutes. But then after 88 minutes, I think it was, Tom Hazelton, the Cronulla forward, gave away a penalty. and Adam Dewey kicked the goal from about 30-odd metres out, straight in front, and won the game. And, the celebrations were amazing, actually. Yeah. It was a game played at Leichhardt, which is normally called the eighth wonder of the world, isn't it? It's which is going to have a $40 million upgrade, by the way. Yeah. So that's really great news for everybody who supports West Tigers, who loves the old Leichhardt Oval. And I mean, I've been to Leichhardt myself, Jake, and I mean it is a bit of a relic, really, but but there's something magical about it as well at the same time.
Yeah, I've seen the proposed plans, and there's a few little changes, but the character's going to be very much the same. They're keeping the hill, which would be great to see, but they're going to add a grandstand down one end and increase the capacity a little bit. But
it's going to have 20,000, isn't it? Ultimately, which is great for West Tigers, and that seemed to be in response to the West Tigers chief executive Shane Richardson saying they'd have to stop playing there unless improvements were made to the stadium, and that was one occasion where his comments really seemed to work. We'll talk about another situation a bit later, won't we? Where his comments were a bit more, less welcome, let's say.
Yes, absolutely. But I haven't been to Leichhardt, mate, so I'm going to have to get down there at some stage.
You will? Oh, gosh, yes.
Yeah, before they do all the renos. All right, mate, well, how about we'll sort of stay on the NRL a little bit here, but big news over the last 24, 48 hours. There was an article by the Sydney Morning Herald talking about Nick Politis, the Sydney Roosters chairman, his interest in potentially investing in Super League clubs. The Manchester Roosters, a potential rebrand for the Salford Red-Devils has been proposed or mentioned in that article. What do you make of all this talk, mate?
Well, I think what maybe we ought to do is to get somebody from the Salford Red-Devils saying they'd like to rebrand the Roosters as the Sydney Red-Devils, and that...
Sydney Red-Devils, yeah. I mean, it sounds the same as Salford Red-Devils, right?
It does, yes. I mean, rebranding a club like that... I mean, Nick Politis is a brilliant businessman, and he's been a brilliant owner of Sydney Roosters, so I'm certainly not going to dismiss out of hand everything that he says. But I think, whatever happens, I mean, and it's great to see someone like him expressing an interest in, British Rugby League and maybe even getting involved at club level. So, we'd certainly welcome him on board. But I think to change the name of the Salford Red-Devils to the Manchester Roosters, especially if they wanted to continue playing at the Salford Community Stadium, would be a non-starter. You wouldn't do that, I don't think. I don't think it would work. I don't think the Salford fans would accept it. So, I think that, I think the Salford club, where it plays at the moment, has got enormous potential to be successful in the heart of Greater Manchester. That's the point. And it doesn't need to change its name because Salford is a great name, and it's a great name in the history of Rugby League. It's also a great name in, you've got things happening in Salford that are quite significant. The BBC is headquartered in the north in Salford, and Salford's come up in the world in recent years. So to move away from its name to call it Manchester, I don't see any point in doing that.
No,
that's not to say we might not welcome a separate Manchester club, but. So who knows what's going to happen with the NRL and rugby league in this country? It's very much up in the air, and I speak to a lot of people at fairly high levels in the English game and at club level and so on. And at the moment, none of them seem quite sure what the NRL's actual intentions are. There's an awful lot of speculation. And it's impossible to believe that discussions haven't taken place since Mike Danson and Simon Moran spoke to Peter Vlandis and Andrew Abdo in Las Vegas at the end of February. But so far, not much is coming out. And it seems to me that the NRL has actually got quite a lot on its plate at the moment, with the new club in Perth due to come on board in 2027, and then the new Papua New Guinea club a year later. That's an awful lot to have to deal with.
Yeah.
Because they've got to get that right, haven't they? So to be thinking then about buying a stake in British Rugby League, while there's potentially a good business case if they do it the right way, it's putting them under a lot of stress, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And look, I'm sure people in the English game would welcome someone like Nick Politis, but it seems like this whole idea is riding on the NRL investing. I don't think he wants to invest unless the NRL invests. And
well, there is a bit of a theory that some people have told me that the NRL our broadcasting contract expires at the end of 2026. The NRL's contract expires at the end of 2027. But some people are telling me that the NRL probably already is a long way down the line to knowing what its next TV contract will be. And it's if it's bundling together the rights for a European Super League as well as its own competition, and it's therefore offering a sort of worldwide coverage of the game, that combined value, the value of the whole could be greater than the sum of the parts, which is debatable, and I don't know whether that is true or not. But if it is, and if they've gone down that route, perhaps with DAZN, as we know, DAZN bought out Foxtel, so DAZN are now big players in Australian Rugby League, and if they're going to bid for the British rights, particularly in coordination with the NRL, then that should give quite a significant boost to the value of the British rights. So who knows? It's a fascinating time to be involved, isn't it?
Yeah, it's something obviously we're going to have to watch the space, but yeah, I can't wait for what the next few years are going to bring.
Well, I've told you, you ought to get in touch with DAZN, Jake, and get a job with them, because they're moving. If they're going to move into rugby league in a big way, they'll need people like you, won't they?
Yeah, well, mate, they can get in touch through the podcast. Just email.
It would be great, wouldn't it?
I have my salary expectations, but hey, I'm willing to make some changes if it's too high.
Of course.
But we will sort of stay on this common theme. In your column, Martyn, one of the big things you're talking about is obviously the Perth Bears. They've been given the green light for 2027, I believe, to come into the NRL. You're speculating, there's a lot of speculation Brad Arthur's going to be the man that takes the reins.
It would be amazing if Brad Arthur wasn't the man who, given everything that's been said about him. Brad. It's Brad's job to lose, isn't it? By the look of it. So one can only imagine that. I think Brad's done a very good job at Leeds. I think he's a very good coach, and I'm pretty sure he could do a good job in Perth as well. So, but it's a hell of a job, though. Having said that, to put together a squad of players, 30 players plus 6 players on development contracts, in just 18 months. Big ask. That's a big job, a big undertaking, and they need to get cracking fairly quickly. As soon as the NRL finally confirms that they are coming in 2027.
Yep. There's a few concerns here for me, and one is the impact of them coming in 2027. What impact is that going to have on the PNG team that comes in 2028? Because I think as it stands, there are plenty of incentives to go and play for the new PNG team, but it's going to still be a struggle to get some of those marquee guys, I think, to uproot their life and move to PNG.
Oh, yes.
And my concern, obviously, and many others share this concern too, is how much of that talent is the Perth team going to snatch up that PNG won't be able to grab a hold of?
Well, quite a lot. And, they've got, they're going to be coming in 12 months before the PNG side. But, and they've got to, the thing about setting up a new club in Perth, rugby league isn't Perth's main game, is it? You know, they're an AFL town, really, Aussie rules, and they've got the West Coast Eagles and the Fremantle Dockers, and they get tremendous crowds at Optus Stadium. A lot of a big following for Aussie rules in Perth.
Yeah.
So rugby league would definitely, you know, be a second sport for those people, as much as it is in Melbourne. Melbourne Storm, I suspect a lot of Melbourne Storm fans also support an AFL team, one of the 9 in Melbourne. So if Perth is going to succeed, they need to, you know, hit the ground running in 2027 with some top players. And, you know, the question is, who are they going to recruit? And Billy Moore, who's a North Sydney legend, has you know, set out his priorities. Jerome Hughes, Payne Haas, Selwyn Cobbo, Herbie Farnworth, and Angus Crichton are the 5 players that he would target, and I suspect that he will be an advisor to the new Perth club, and you know, if he's got anything to do with it, those players will be the ones they'll be chasing. But the question from our point of view is, which players from Super League will be targeted as well? And you know, it's very often the case, isn't it, that a coach moves from one club and goes to another, but you know, a few of the players who he's been coaching at his existing club follow him to the new club. So if we're looking at Leeds, Brodie Croft has said that he would like to play in the NRL again. Harry Newman is a potential candidate, I would think. You know, a very good young player, probably 25 years old now, but you know, in the prime of his career. So those are 2 players, but you know, there could be several more, couldn't there?
Yeah, that's right. And who knows, the way Jake Connor's playing this season, maybe Brad's thinking, I could
you
take
never
him with
know.
me.
Yeah, you never know. You never know.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to watch because the talks with the NRL's interest in Super League, you know, we've heard a 10-team competition mentioned many times before, but there's also been comments this week, and we've got them in League Express. Ian Blease was saying he's worried about that funnel of talent going down.
Too much talent.
Yeah,
and you can see why. I mean, the salary cap in 2027, I think it's due to be 12.1 million Aussie dollars, isn't it? Which is about £6 million. Well, our salary cap is, you know, around about 2.1 million, with a few additions as well. It's not quite that straightforward, but it's significantly greater. I mean, marquee players in England can still earn great salaries comparable to Australian salaries, but the standard player, his salary will be much lower than the standard Australian player. So there's a lot of incentive to go to Australia. It's a great competition. It's growing in popularity. You know, the crowds are growing, the TV audiences are growing, and you know, Vlandis and Abdo are very ambitious to, you know, make the competition greater, to expand its geographical footprint and so on. So there's an awful lot of attraction, and ultimately at the end of the day, if you've got a young player who's a promising young player and he decides he wants to go to play in the NRL, then it's very difficult to stand in his way. I mean, Morgan Knowles from St Helens is going to join the Dolphins next year, and that goes back to, you know, Christian Wolf coached Morgan at St Helens, and you know, Morgan's now going to join him next year in Brisbane with the Dolphins, you know, and that does happen a lot. Morgan Gannon from Leeds, I mean, that's the player whose, you know, departure has really frustrated Ian Blease, going to the New Zealand Warriors. Whether Morgan is wise to do that, you know, who knows, but it's that young man's making that decision himself, and good luck to him. I hope it all works out for him. Martyn Nicholson went from Warrington to Canberra, and he seems to be playing really well for Canberra this year, doesn't he?
Yeah. No,
scoring lots of tries, 5 tries, I think, so far.
Yeah, that's right. He's been a great signing for Raiders, and he's really fit in very well there. And I think since he got his first chance, he hasn't looked back, has he?
No.
Ricky's just got a way of finding the right ones for his side, doesn't he?
Yeah. I don't think it's interesting that, isn't it? Because if I'm honest about it, Jake, I don't think a lot of Australian players really fancy spending a lot of time in Canberra. It's probably the least popular Australian venue, isn't it, for a lot of Aussie players? Apart from anything else, it's a lot colder than most of the parts of Australia because of its location. Whereas for English players, that it's not quite so
easy adjustment for them.
It's a lot easier to adjust to a place like Canberra than, if you're an English player going up to Townsville, for example, would be quite difficult to adjust.
Yeah. I don't know how Johnny Bateman did it.
Well, he managed to get bitten by a spider, but fortunately recovered, and actually I thought played fairly well at the weekend as well.
He did.
John Bateman, don't write him off for England this year.
Yeah, plenty left in those legs, that's for sure. But again, we'll watch this space over the coming weeks and months. Now, some other controversy we touched on earlier, mate, but there's been some comments made by the West Tigers CEO Shane Richardson on James Graham's Buy Round podcast about the state of the Super League and some of the clubs. What's the latest on this, mate?
Well, the latest is that he's actually flown to America to attend the wedding of his niece, which he says has been in the pipeline for a long time. Yep. So he's nicely stepped out of that controversy and the controversy about Lachlan Galvin at West Tigers. But I should think, actually, the way they played at the weekend, I should think he wishes he'd still been there, to share in the glory of them beating Cronulla. Yeah. But he made for some very strange reason, Shane made some negative comments about Batley. When he was talking about, the state of British Rugby League. He sort of used Batley as a sort of totem of British Rugby League's decline. I'm not quite sure why he would want to do that. And, of course, he exaggerated the decline of British Rugby League as well, which I don't think has declined, on the field. The problem we've got in British Rugby League is that we're not, our expenditure is exceeding our income at the moment, which strikes me that that's probably that's probably what our country's doing as well. There are a lot of organisations for whom financially are struggling at the moment. So it's not just rugby league. I mean, Leeds United have just been promoted in football, but last year they lost £60 million.
Yep.
So it's not just rugby league that's struggling, Jake. But Kevin Nicholas, the chairman and owner of Batley Bulldogs, is, as soon as he saw those comments, he actually emailed Shane Richardson with a very critical and rather sardonic series of comments, suggesting that Shane might want to get his facts right in future, and inviting Shane to a game at Batley at some point in the future, where they would be very glad to give him hospitality and a few beers and so on, and they'd be very glad to put him right on a few things. It was actually quite a good-humoured letter by Kevin Nicholas, but with a very sharp edge. So, and I don't think at the last count, I spoke to Kevin a couple of days ago, or I texted him and said, did Shane ever respond to that email? And at that point he hadn't. So whether he has in the intervening period, I really don't know. But Kevin is not a man, to mess with. And if you criticise Batley Bulldogs, you criticise. I mean, they're a great club in my view. I never would criticise them. I love going to Batley. It's a brilliant venue to go and watch rugby league. And if you book hospitality there, you enjoy yourself. So it's a great place. And Shane clearly either hasn't been or hasn't been for goodness knows how many years.
Yeah, no, good on Kevin. It's nice to see the fans appreciate that when you get in there and you bat for your club. You know?
Absolutely, yes, of course.
Yeah, that's right. But no, it's it got a lot of attention, that podcast that he did, and
yes.
Great to see him sticking up for the Batley Bulldogs.
Yeah, but I mean, it does illustrate though that a lot of Australians, we allow ourselves to be described in less than glowing terms, don't we? And the problem is we've not got anybody at the very highest level in our sport who actually speaks up for it. And I mean, it shouldn't just be left to Kevin Nicholas to put Shane in his place. It should be, the people right at the top of the game who speak up for the game. And at one time, when we used to have Maurice Lindsay many years ago, Maurice would have done that. Maurice would have spoken out and made sure that nobody could get away with unfair criticism of that sort.
Yep. Now, it's like I said, it's an interesting space going forward, but great to see him sticking up for his club. Now, mate, how about we look at what else have we got here? Oh, I saw Magic Weekend's crowd attendance. What's your prediction? Do you think we'll set a new record this weekend?
Well, it's very hard. I've not checked. I've not asked them what the latest figures are. But the speculation that this could be the first time that the Sunday crowds are bigger than the Saturday ones, which would be quite interesting, wouldn't it?
And I guess I think it was last year. Was it 50-odd thousand at Elland Road? So
it was the lowest, 52,000. I seem to remember as the aggregate attendance. I mean, Elland Road isn't an attractive place to hold the Magic Weekend, really, because it's not a Leeds is not a sort of what you might think of as an obvious venue, but Newcastle, everybody loves going to Newcastle, and hopefully it will be a big attendance, and I'd be very happy with 65,000 over the 2 days if we can reach that figure. So it remains to be seen whether we can or not, and we've got some really great games, I think. There's no doubt about that, and the climax to Saturday, St Helens versus Leeds. The climax to Sunday the final game is Castleford versus Wakefield, with Wigan v Warrington, the middle game. Which I find a bit strange, really. I'm slightly surprised that that the Magic Weekend, the games are selected so that it's 1v3 in terms of last year's finishing positions, 2v4, 5v7, 6v8, 9v11, 10v12. I'm somewhat surprised that they don't actually start with the lower games on the Saturday and build up to the climax on the Sunday with the big game, which would be 1v3, which would be Wigan versus Warrington. It seems odd to end the weekend with Castleford versus Wakefield, which you might have thought should have been the opening game of the Magic Weekend. But who knows? Anyway, we'll. That's a minor gripe, I suppose. But I'd love to see it being a real big success.
Also hard to predict as well how teams are going at this stage of the season. Like, we didn't expect Hull FC to be as high on the ladder as they are this year. So.
No, they play Huddersfield. And Salford are playing Hull KR because Salford finished 4th and Hull KR 2nd last year. Well, you wouldn't think that would be a tight game, would you?
No. But I guess, if we go back to the end of last season, we'll go, that's a great game to have.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Obviously, we didn't know what was going to happen. Now, I also saw, mate, it looks like they're going to announce the Vegas clubs in the coming weeks. Who do you think it's going to be?
I think it'll be Hull KR and St Helens, probably. Hull KR look to be... consolidating as the favourites to go there, and I think St Helens will probably be the second favourites.
Yeah. Do you think Leeds fans will be feeling
I think Leeds would like to go as well. it looks like Hull KR versus St Helens or Leeds. St Helens slight favourites over Leeds, but who knows? I think Leeds. The good thing about Leeds is that Leeds might be a more recognisable name in America than St Helens, simply because Leeds is a much bigger city than St Helens.
Yeah.
So, who knows?
Yeah. And last week we touched on a reader's poll looking at who the best teenagers were, I believe it was.
Yes.
Did we get the results of that one, mate? Because there was some really good names and some good young talent there.
Yes, the player who got the vote as the best teenager was Harry Robertson of St Helens, 19.76%, closely followed by George Whitby, also of St Helens, 16.71%, with Fletcher Rooney, then Jack Farrimand, then Aaron Lindop, Logan Moy, Harvey Smith of Wakefield, and Guillermo Aspira-Bichet as the 8th best. He got 6.93%. I don't think people will have seen him as much as the others, though.
Yeah.
So I think he's a potentially really good young player, young Aspira-Bichet, and I'd love to see him coming through as a real top French player.
Yep. Yeah, okay. Well, something to keep our eyes peeled for. Now, mate, anything else you want to touch on before we get into the Magic Weekend games?
Well, this week's Reader's Poll, since we're talking about Reader's Polls, Jake, who should be picked on the left wing for England in this year's Ashes series? And we've got a number of options there. Matty Ashton, Joe Burgess, Josh Charnley, Ash Handley, Tom Johnston, Liam Marshall, Lewis Martyn or Adam Swift. Who do you think should be the left winger for England?
Well, if we're going off a form at the moment, I'd have to go Matty Ashton. Joe Burgess is having a really good season. But, it's hard to look past Matty Ashton.
It
He's
is.
so reliable.
Yeah.
And hat-trick on the weekend.
We'll see whether he wins the poll.
And he's, I don't know, he's so quick. I'd love to see how he would rank as, the fastest player in the Super League. Like, I don't know. It's hard to say who would take that title. I have to give you a good shot.
Talking about English wingers, Dominic Young was dropped by Sydney Roosters last weekend. So, that, and there's a bit of talk about him moving back to Newcastle Knights.
Yeah, okay.
It's an interesting one, isn't it?
I was always devastated that he left the Knights because I think he just fit in so well there. And we've seen it with players in the past where they've left a club to go to the Roosters and then return to that club. I look back to Justin Hodges, who left the Broncos, came back, it didn't work out for him, and sometimes, under the bright lights and living on Bondi can be a bit much. But yeah, I'd like to see him back at the Knights.
So would I, yeah. The Knights... The Knights are the big disappointment in the NRL this season, aren't they? They seem to lack any sort of attacking flair, despite having Caelan Ponga in their side. And they actually let Will Price go back to Hull FC. Will Price is a really smart attacking player, but he didn't get a chance in their side this season. And so he left them and came back to England to join Hull FC. Amazing that, with such a limited attack, they let him go, but that's their decision.
And he's looked really good since he's come back to Super League.
He's a very good young player. Yeah.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, hey, Perth Bears might come knocking.
You never know. yeah, you never know.
All right, mate, let's take a look at this weekend's matchups. On Saturday, we have Lee taking on Catalans in the first matchup.
Well, I think Lee will win that. And, they'll be playing in front of... quite a lot of their own supporters, hopefully, who make the journey up to Newcastle. But Catalans, as I say, Catalans very often do quite well at the Magic Weekend, so I certainly wouldn't write them off. And the big stage might be the place where they really start to perform. So, but I'd still pick Lee by a fairly small margin, 6 points perhaps.
Yep. The second matchup, Hull KR taking on Salford.
Well, gosh, there's only one result here, and I think Hull KR might reach 50, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'd be glad if Salford could give them a much tighter game, obviously, but Salford have been so, hit by departures. Chris Atkin, the latest one, going to Castleford, and Dion Cross having gone to St Helens a week or so earlier. Who have they got left, really? You're tempted to ask.
Yeah. No, it's very grim at the moment for Salford. St Helens versus Leeds finishes off the fixtures on Saturday.
Well, St Helens probably need to win this more than Leeds need to win it. really, to be perfectly honest. I mean, they're together in 5th and 6th place, both with 10 points in the Super League table. So, you know, in a sense, they're locked together almost. So it's a crucial game, and St Helens haven't really been playing with a great deal of confidence. Leeds have been perhaps a bit more confident, but they've had 1 or 2 games against weaker sides. So, you know, I think St Helens might really bounce back. But as you said earlier, it's going to be really interesting to see whether Johnny Lomax plays in this game, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd hope. I think he will be back, but I don't know what Paul Wellens is thinking.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Moving on to Sunday's matchups, we have Huddersfield taking on Hull FC.
Well, you would think Hull FC would win this game fairly convincingly, wouldn't you? Given the way the respective seasons have gone to so far. But at some point, Huddersfield, you know, it's funny. Huddersfield started the season by losing games, but that they'd been winning at half time, which suggested that they weren't that bad a team. They were just bad at pacing themselves through a game. But since then, they've lost quite a few games more convincingly as their injury toll has mounted. They did bring some players back at the weekend for the Castleford game. And if there's going to be a shock at the Magic Weekend, this could be the game that, where the shock, arises. But I'm not quite confident enough to predict a shock in this case. I think Hull will win by 12 points.
Yep. Moving on to Wigan versus Warrington.
Well, I think Wigan will win this game, and I think they'll win quite convincingly. I think they'll win by 16 points, mainly because Warrington will be without Williams and Sneed in the halfbacks, and I'm not quite sure, what they will do about that, really. It's going to be very interesting to see what team Warrington put out, in terms of the halfback combination and the spine and so on.
Yep. And the final matchup of the weekend, we have Castleford taking on Wakefield.
Well, Castleford have got their first win. Well, not the first win, the second win at the weekend at Huddersfield. They only lost by a point at Wakefield a week earlier on the day before Good Friday. And I think they might have enough improvement in them to win this game. I think I would tip Castleford to beat Wakefield by 6 points, but, that prediction could come back to bite me, couldn't it?
Yeah, no, well, mate, it's set to be a very entertaining weekend of rugby league, and I'm almost jealous that I'm not going to be out in Newcastle getting amongst it.
Yeah.
Because
you picked a bad time to go home, didn't you?
I know, mate, and we're just going into summer. But unfortunately, and they might not like me saying this, but I've got to get back for my partner's brother's wedding, so that's why we sort of had to leave at this point, as opposed to staying for the summer. So there's no real point in us sort of flying there and then back just for a couple of months and then going back home again. So,
no, not really, no.
Because we all know how much I love a holiday or a summer trip somewhere, mate.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I guess this will be the last time in person. Well, not last, because we'll do one, when you come to Australia or I come back.
Of course, yeah.
But we'll be back next week, hopefully, mate. So it's been a pleasure.
On a screen, yes.
Yeah,
on a screen.
Absolutely, mate.
Great stuff.
All right, guys. We'll wrap it up here. Thanks, Martyn.
And thanks, Jake, and just my thanks to you for everything you've done over the last couple of years. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and hopefully we'll continue.
Oh, mate, it's been great. And if there's ever been any homesickness, coming here and talking about rugby league has made it all good,
Big
mate.
House has been your second home.
It has, mate. It has been.
It has, yes.
All right, guys, we'll wrap it up here and do it again next week, Martyn.
Great stuff.
Awesome.
Thank you, Jake.
Nice. Cheers.